Well, hello everybody, I'm LA Little, and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets, we do it from a neoclassical perspective each time. We ask ourselves what happened today, and what does it tell us about the coming ones. Do this show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday. It's broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time. It's archived on YouTube under the channel LA Little. Also do a weekly show on Sundays, a little broader perspective. There we're asking ourselves what happened last week and what will it tell us about the coming ones. Let's take a look at these markets. Let's start with the numbers. A big blowout to the top side, right? 1.5%, or actually 1.75% mostly across the board. Squeeze, folks. It's a range trade. We've talked about that a lot of times. Last night we were looking at it. We couldn't tell. We had dojis. We didn't know if they were going to flip. We had the support in the sectors. We saw that. We had some preliminary type moves in Europe suggesting they were trying to get their bounce going because they were extending that range to the downside. So we knew it was coming. We just didn't know it was today. Well, it was today. We open up, we gap up, we keep running pretty much all day long. And then we got a little boost partway through with the Greek situation. And Merkel blinking, supposedly, is what they're telling us. Bonds down again, and that's becoming a problem. If we look for a sore thumb, it's here. Dollar down 0.5%. Yen was up big. That's hurting the Japanese market. Probably will hurt it again tonight. Oil took a nice big spike to the upside. Silver and gold up, but not nearly as good as the gains would suggest. Rather than start there, let's go over to the S&P. So if we look here on the S&P 500, we got a big spike up today, as you know. And what's going to happen on each of these now, not just on the S&P, but more so on the others as well, is it's going to be all about the retest regenerate zones. And that's going to be true everywhere you look tonight. And so what we're talking about is when you break a swing point low, right? In this case, we broke this swing point low. There's a low, there's an L here underneath it. When you break it, right, and you come back within 6 bars, which is what we've done, the probabilities that you'll get to the other side of the bar are pretty high. And so you're going to press and try to press up to the other side. Now, think about that, and let's go to the next chart. So that's the S&P. Let's go to the NASDAQ. So the NASDAQ, if you're looking for that same retest regen, here's your low, right? Swing point low. Breaks it yesterday, barely, right, with a doji. And what is it doing? It's coming back up to do a full retest regen within 6 bars. And what does it do? It gets over it, back under it. I think it has just a little bit more volume. Yeah, barely. So you hit it with just a little bit more volume. You go over it, you close back underneath it, and today it looked like it was going to hold that break. And so it's a full retest, and what it should do at this point is attempt to quote-unquote regenerate lower. Now, if it were to do that, that probably or potentially could take on the form of some sort of an ABCD structure to the downside. But as we just noted on the S&P 500, it also came back within 5 bars. So what is it going to try to do? It's going to try to push to the top of that bar on the S&P, and if it does that, this one up here is going to push higher. And so what I suspect is if we get farther push, and there's reasonably we might, then this is going to work its way right back up to the top, while the others come back to the tops of their not breakdown bars, but of the tops of their retest regen bars. So NASDAQ, strongest one, already testing, right? And test with a little bit more volume tonight. So what that suggests is that, yeah, we could get a little pullback, but it's probably going to hit it again. NDX. And so if we look at the NDX, kind of looks like the NASDAQ, just weaker version of it. Hello, here we go. Just a weaker version, right? Coming back up. It's also doing the retest regen. I'm not going to draw all of these out, but I'll do the indexes. So there's your retest regen. You're about halfway through it. You usually get into it that deep, you're probably going to get to the other side, right? And it's less than 6 bars, so it all matches. The other thing that suggests that we're probably going to try to press higher is the Russell actually gets over the highs. So now it's not a swing point high break because it already had that on this bar, right? It already broke over it here. What does it do today though is it gets over the previous bar. It's within 6 bars, so it's not a swing point high, but what is it trying to do? It's trying to get back up to the top. That was the breakdown bar from way back in April, and it's working its way back up there to get to it. That's up around 1277. Another 9 points to the top side. Again, thinking back, S&P trying to get to the top of the retest regenerate, bearish, retest regenerate. NDX trying to do it. NASDAQ probably going to get over it, and the Russell's going to try to get to the highs. And the Russell's already showing you enough strength to suggest that's what it's going to do. So you put all those together, that's a fairly strong indication that this thing is going to try and trade higher. You know, maybe tomorrow you get a little pullback, but if you're looking at it from a next day or two, you know, into next week potentially, there it's telling you it wants to try and trade higher. You got the big move, it's not going to stop on 1 bar probably. You know, we could get bad news flow, it could, but right now it doesn't look like that's the case. Move over to Europe, because right now Europe is the key. And Europe's doing the same thing. A bearish retest regenerate, in other words, it's getting its bounce, it's coming back up into this area. Now, the thing that's different with Europe compared to what we just saw with the US is that here you actually have more volume comparatively as you're coming back up to do the full retest regen. So Europe to me looks like it's going to come into this area, and it is going to look like it's going to retest and then regen lower. Now whether it regens lower or just looks like it is a different story, but it does look to me like this is going to have a hard time. That's tomorrow. The way that changes is if you get some positive news flow tomorrow, the next day, but I suspect it's going to come into that zone, bounce back down, and then we're going to see what it really wants to do. And that, you know, if you can envision this, that would be something like this, right? So you go up here, and actually you extend this up to about that area, right? Then you come down maybe into this area, you know, the intersection of these bars, the low, the high of the low of this swing point low, and then you potentially come back, right? Some sort of an ABCD structure to get you up higher and to get you over this. What you're shooting for, what you're watching for, what you want to see is this direction done, and we're going to go back to something like that. And that's what we're going to do. How do we know that? Well, we know that when the retest regen zone fails to regenerate lower. And so that's why this area becomes so important. That's the CACs. Let's look at the DAX. DAX looks about the same, not quite as strong, but it's doing the same thing, coming back into the retest regen zone. If we look over to Asia, Hong Kong, we've been talking about Hong Kong wanting to come back into this area for a very long time. I've been talking about it's going to try to make its run there. Well, last night it did. It's back in there. It's into the gap area. I expect Hong Kong is going to try to bounce right back out of here. And so you come in there. That was your buy today. Bounce back out. We'll see what kind of bounce it gets. Potentially can trade back up into this area is the way it looks to me. That's Hong Kong. If you look at Shanghai, Shanghai is unwilling to give anything up. Had the decision on the MCSI last night. They said, no, you're not quite ready. Volume tails off, hangs. That thing's going to try to go higher. That's the Shanghai. If we glance at some of these others, actually, let's just quickly run through them because I don't have a lot more I want to talk about. A few things, but not a lot. Australia, under, over, extended move, 2-bar reversal. This one's going to try to bounce tomorrow. India, overnight. India, test lower, weak bounce. Yeah, it can bounce a little bit more, but it's going to come down and test again. Brazil, good volume, bouncing. That one actually is probably going to try to trade higher. France we just did. Let's go to London. Under, over, more volume. You test over here. Let's see what the volumes were. 9.2 versus 8. So that actually is a good test. This one's going to get a decent bounce as well, right? You had a decent test of the low. You hold it. You have less volume here compared to there. So that says that you can bounce it. And what's it going to do? Full retest regen off of this bar. That means all the way back up to here. That's the London market. Let's look at Toronto. And Toronto had broken down. So Toronto test the lows. 167 versus 156. So that's actually a good test of the lows. This thing's going to try to trade all the way back up and do a full retest regen itself, which is back up here around 15,000, almost 15,100. We already looked at Hong Kong. Let's see what Korea looks like. And so Korea's going lower. Maybe it holds tonight, but that one's going lower. And Nikkei. Now the yen has been pressing up, and with the yen strengthening, that puts pressure on the Nikkei. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Nikkei trade lower again tonight. Come back in deeper. Now the thing that it's done is it's changed trend. This is significant. So just like we were talking about bearish retest regens, this was a bullish one, right? This was a breakout to the top side. So you break out, you come back, you do it. Now this is fascinating actually, because this is not the high odds. This one actually trades more than 6 bars after the breakout, which says the first time back, the probabilities of holding are fairly good, very, very high actually, but it fails to. It fails to hold. That is actually a more bearish thing than normal, right? Because it should hold. Probabilities are like 82% it should hold. And so in that case, when I see something like that, that says, hey, this thing really has some pressure on it. And if we look at the yen, you can see why. We'll go to that chart here in a minute. But that tells me, hey, if you're trading this, you want to be careful. You don't want to try to buy this first dip. You got to let it dip farther. Let it bounce. Let it dip farther and buy the deeper dip, so to speak. Indonesia. So this is the straight times. They get a bounce. That's an extended move, 2-bar reversal. That one's going to get a decent pop. And let's see what Taipei looks like. Inside bar, this one also doesn't look like it can lift very much. So you got the Nikkei and the Taiwan index looking pretty rough. And you got some decent bounces elsewhere, and that's about it. So overseas markets mostly want to bounce farther, right? Want to push up farther. Let's go to the OX markets. Actually, before we do that, let me take a viewer question, because we got a viewer asking me a question. I thought this was a really interesting question. So, and I want to pull over all the charts. I'll start with the monthly just so you can see what the charts look like. So this is healthcare services, AMN. You can see two or three things here. One is, if you're looking at this in terms of trend, okay, what's your trend? Well, your trend's clearly up. If you look at it just in terms of ABCD structures, and I'm doing rough ones here, I'm not doing exact. You know, you got an ABCD structure there, you got another pullback here, and now another push up. That's and this is on a monthly time frame. That one's actually extended on the monthly. You got good volume coming into this thing on the way up. All those things look positive, look good. Let's look at the weekly. On the weekly, this thing is just straight up, lots of good volume coming into it. So everything's beautiful, right? And then you go to the daily, and not too bad either, right? Not too shabby. This particular question was, I shorted this. I shorted it at 28.12. Okay, so 28.12 was probably yesterday, and it looks like it was. Okay, so first of all, I do not short a chart like this, right? I need something that tells me this thing's done. And I don't want that to be a projection. In other words, if I look at this on the trading cube, right? It's 47% here. That means this thing can extend for another, 20 bars. So you could go another 2 or 3 weeks on this before it gets to an overbought position. If you look at it here, yeah, it's not as far, but this will probably coincide with that, and they'll both be overbought together, right? Their mean time to failure will be great, getting to the point where they're extended. Look at it on the daily, the monthly, it's not extended at all. So when I look at it from those perspectives, this thing can run a lot farther. I mean, it doesn't have to stop. And so when I see something like that, I see nothing but strength on the way up. There's much better things than to short something like this. My suggestion is whatever you do, put a stop on this thing. I would put a stop on the projection or something, right? And I'm trying to see where that is. Looks like the projection's just about done on this particular time frame, but I don't know if it's going to hold. So you had a projection from here to here and up. That's already done. And then you had another little one nested inside of it. That one also looks done. So you got to put a stop up here somewhere, whatever you're willing to take as a risk. And I would be looking for an exit. I wouldn't be staying short. If you're going to short something that's in a downtrend or a sideways trend looking to go down. Don't short something that's in an uptrend on all time frames. You're asking for trouble. That's not a good short, in my opinion. All right? So, and nothing wrong with asking these questions. I mean, it's a learning experience, and that's what I'm here for. But, I'm just saying, don't do that. That's not. Trades depend on two things. Your risk reward and your probability of success. Your probability of success here is very low. Right? Your reward to risk is not that great either. So, in both cases, it's not a particularly good situation. Let me go to the ox markets real quick because I want to show you the yen. So the Japanese minister comes out and says, hey, this thing, you guys have sold it down too far. Nothing like that, right? Like somehow they know where too far is. I don't even know where too far is. Well, not that I'm as good as them, but, come on. Give me a break. This thing, given what has been said, this thing's going to try to make its way all the way back up here now. And what's interesting about that is if I pull over the weekly chart, so this price point here is 80, what is that low? 80.50. If you bring this over on the weekly and pull it in, on the weekly chart, what you have here is, and I'm just going to look at these two lows here, 80, right at 80, and this one's 80 also. So you got two swing point lows at 80. You've got these swing point lows at just over 80. That's where it's going to try to get to, and that's probably where this thing is going to collapse back down, because I don't think you can talk this up that far in that long of time. And so yeah, you can get big spikes up, you can get short covering like crazy, right? And this thing can run for a while, but when it gets up here, it's going to be a nice little short again, so get ready. That's the way that one's going to work out. In the meantime, it's going to hurt the Japanese equity markets, because why? Their currency isn't devalued anymore, which is what's leading this thing up. Gold, silver, they were up today, but as I said, ugly candles. I don't know how much farther they're going to bounce. Doesn't look like that much farther to me, but looks like it's just a dead cat bounce. The nemesis out here is the bonds. If you look at the bonds continue down, volumes continuing to be heavy. If there's going to be an issue that brings this market back, it looks to me like it's going to be the bonds. Because as these things break, especially if they finally break over here on the long-term time frame, and that's got a ways to go. It's got to get down to 113, 110. That is going to get people's attention. So where are we at? Where we're at is, where we thought we would be at some point fairly soon. I didn't know it would be today, but it was, and that is that we got a bounce going, and that bounce probably is going to carry a little bit farther. We're going to do those full retest regens, it looks like, on multiple sectors and markets. And after that, well, then we get to see what really happens, right? Because that's the next big test. That's the next area of significance. You set your targets, you see how they behave when they get there, and you decide what to do next. That's why we were looking, probing, thinking, bounce. Extensions had been met. Ranges had been extended a little bit, but not too far, and then you got that big reversal the day before on the European markets. Follow through today, follow through here, probably follow through in Asia tonight. Around the world we go. Folks, thanks for joining me. Tell a friend, tell two. Have yourself a great night, and I'll see you next time. I'm LA. This is, and it was, your daily NeoTA wrap. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, folks.